Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the ARC Digital Transformation Viewpoints podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things related to digital transformation in energy, industrial, and critical infrastructure applications. The podcast is the creation of the ARC Advisory Group Digital Transformation Practice. ARC advises leading companies on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business. To engage further, please like and share our podcasts or reach out directly on Twitter at ARC_advisory, or please go to the website at www.arcweb.com.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mark Sen Gupta. I'm an analyst here with the ARC Advisory Group, and I cover several process automation related topics, including remote operations. With me today is James Redmond with Schneider Electric. He's a global offer manager for remote operations, and he joins us to discuss what he's been witnessing and provide some insight into the remote operations market and some possible responses to these trends to allow your company to stay ahead and thrive. James, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Mark. It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah, great to have you. Before we get started, can you give the audience a bit of an idea of what you consider as remote operations?
Certainly. So what we consider, or certainly what I consider remote operations, covers various assets across a geographically dispersed area. So if you can imagine in the energy field, oil wells dispersed over a rural area, various stations along a pipeline. Conversely, in the water wastewater fields, irrigation sites, pumping stations, wastewater ponds, overflow ponds, monitoring stations for that. So it's important industrial or infrastructure type assets, but outside of a plant and typically outside of an urban area.
Awesome. Okay. So, we're talking about these markets and we want to talk about the trends. What macro trends do you see impacting your customers with regards to remote operations?
Certainly. So one of the first ones we're really seeing is a big generational change with the new developers, technicians, engineers entering the field. These people are digital natives, so they haven't lived without computers, they haven't lived without internet. And so they're looking at a lot of these common problems we see with pipelines, with water pumping stations, but they want to approach that in a different ways. Another trend that we're seeing that I think is really important is there's more and more interest in leveraging AI. Certainly we've seen in the news, a lot of promising or interesting stories, right, about what you can do with ChatGPT, for example. But deeper than that, they're looking to take advantage of AI to analyze that data and to really provide operational insights automatically that will help optimize the operations in the field or in the application with which they're concerned. A couple other ones that we're seeing, there's multiple paths for data. So in the past, right, data in remote operations typically would be a very hierarchical situation. You would have your outstation with your RTU, with your sensors. So your sensors would go to your RTU would in turn collect that information and pass that on to a SCADA system. Operators look at the SCADA system, communicate that to the technicians over the phone, for example, in other ways. Now what we're seeing is there's different paths to the operator. So there's certainly SCADA systems, and that's going to continue forward. But in some cases, we're seeing information going as well to the cloud in parallel to that, or to a historian service in parallel to that, or to an analytics service in parallel to the SCADA. A lot of customers I'm encountering are looking for ways to go directly to the operator, right? So rather than waiting for the communications to come through the SCADA system, they want their remote assets to signal to the operators on duty that there's a problem, for example, using a text message.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff going on there. There's another thing that you didn't touch on in this, and I want to get into as well, and that's the impact of government regulations. So the industries that you you mentioned earlier, oil and gas, water, they have a lot of government regulations pushing on them and defining borders for them, et cetera. How do you see that impacting, operational technology in this area?
So if I had to summarize in one sentence, government regulation is forcing IT into OT, operational technology space. So I think everyone here is familiar, and everyone listening certainly, with what happened with Colonial Pipelines, right? There's a cybersecurity attack. It didn't actually, to my understanding, affect their OT systems, but nonetheless, it forced them to shut down gas transmission all along and oil transmission all along the eastern seaboard in the United States. So that in turn has led to a lot of motivation, certainly by the United States government, to better protect critical infrastructure like pipelines. And so what we've seen is the TSA has come out with 3 successive directions for pipelines specifically. And initially, they just mandated improved reporting mechanisms, better descriptions of what pipeline companies are doing to secure their OT assets. Subsequent directives, the second and third ones, mandate IT-like structures to better secure that technology. So password protection, controlling access to the sites. And so, for instance, if an employee leaves for whatever reason, all those credentials need to be updated. Okay, so who solved all these problems already with our desktop computers that we all have, or our laptops? IT, right? And so what that is really doing is accelerating the convergence of IT and OT technology. And in some ways, I see this as a benefit, though, because we can take advantage of those technologies, those solutions, those approaches that IT's already made, and leverage that to better secure our OT technologies. And I would add, we see similar pressures accumulating. For instance, the TSA's put in similar regulations for rail, for logistics, I believe, meaning trucking. And likewise, water, wastewater, we fully expect similar regulations to come in the United States, and we're starting to see those in Western Europe as well.
Interesting. So we've gone over some of the trends and challenges we're getting. They're not going anywhere, right? If anything else, they're going to increase. So what do you recommend for operators what do you recommend for them to do in order to overcome these challenges? Okay.
Well, the first thing I would suggest to them is to invest in security. So as I alluded to, security is not an option anymore. So I mentioned Colonial Pipeline. So a second point of concern is the town of Oldsmar, Florida. Are you familiar with what happened there?
That's the water treatment plant?
Yeah, the water treatment plant with the PLC on the internet.
Right.
Right. Yep. So for those listening who aren't familiar with it, as I understand, there's a water treatment plant, there's a PLC, there's public internet access to that, and someone hacked into it and started increasing the injections of a certain chemical geometrically. Now, fortunately, an operator happened to walk by, saw on the HMI there was a problem, and shut that process down. But given the myriad of different water authorities throughout the United States, Canada, Western Europe, and the world, I fear it's only a matter of time that another vulnerability like that's going to be exploited. So I suppose the key point I want to make here is that I would encourage everyone listening to really take into account that cyber's not an option. It's something we need. And the time is now to really invest in equipment and techniques for cybersecurity that are also scalable. So a second thing I would suggest to kind of take advantage of these challenges is to, as I mentioned earlier, we have this next generation of developers entering the automation market. And so these individuals are playing with Raspberry Pis. They're learning using Linux. They're learning using languages like Python. So to migrate or to move or to take advantage of those skills, and the fact there's huge communities in the internet with lots of resources available, like forums, libraries, packages, etc., to really leverage that to solve these problems we have now. And so by investing in technologies that use embedded Linux, I would encourage people listening to this to do that and to take advantage of those skill sets, because people are ready to use them and they can take fresh approaches and solve these problems that are common to remote operations in new and more effective ways. Finally, I'd encourage people to have a hard look at analytics. Certainly, we can see some of the initial benefits of that, being able to monitor simple things like vibration on a machinery or flow levels or pumping speed. But as the technologies evolve, we're going to see more and more capabilities to generate actionable information as our computing systems grow more capable. And those able to take advantage of this will progressively increase their operational efficiency, I think, significantly.
Interesting. Yeah, analytics are all the rage for sure.
No, indeed.
Yeah, and there's, if you look at what's available on the market you talked about Raspberry Pi and Linux, etc. What other types of technology do you see helping meet the challenges that this industry faces?
Well, indeed. So I'll start back with analytics. So we take Python, which is really the default language for machine learning and AI. So what we see now is we can apply these algorithms and it will look for things we tell it to look for. But the evolution I see of that is we're going to be able to use these technologies to develop systems that will be able to tell us things we can't foresee. So just to give an example, long ago, I developed a sucker rod pump control system. Okay, so that was fun. So I was just playing around with ChatGPT, and I asked it to describe how I could optimize the sucker rod pump. And so it described how to perform the downhole equations, to identify different conditions. Okay, so that was exciting. So I asked it then how it could develop a system to apply machine learning to further optimize it. And so was able to describe in detail, surprising detail, and these things aligned with my knowledge of the application, algorithms for identifying predictive maintenance opportunities, for condition monitoring, for more sophisticated fault detection around worn valves or plungers. So it's this ability to tell us these things that a typical person or even a skilled operator isn't going to be able to see, I think, is really what's going to take AI to the next level. Now, a second technology that I think is going to help to meet these challenges is, as I mentioned, role-based access control, really right to the edge where we have these remote operations. This, I think, is where IT and OT conversions are both going to lead us. So by being able to link operator access to these important, critical even, remote assets, to what roles, what credentials these operators have, we'll have a much more powerful tool for securing these assets and access to them, and doing so in a way that's scalable. In many cases, we have a handful of operators maintaining dozens or even low hundreds of assets, and it's not really scalable to change the credentials unit by unit, and it's massive cost where you have to try. So by leveraging things like Active Directory, LDAP, and those technologies that IT's already solved the problem for with operational technology, I think that's going to be a huge benefit to remote operations. And a final set of technologies I think that really needs to be explored is the next generation of protocols for remote operations. So certainly I see going forward a strong case for using DMP3, particularly with its secure authentication technologies available to it. But likewise, protocols like MQTT and SparkPlug-B, really it's a common extension, and OPCUA are very powerful tools that will give our customers a much more powerful way to access their data, to harness that data, and to pass that data to the multiple systems so they can best take advantage of it to optimize their operations and identify what needs to be done.
Okay. Now, Schneider Electric recently introduced a new product as well for the SCADA market. You want to talk about that a bit?
Sure. So I'm very excited that we launched our brand new SCADAPack RTU. So that's the SCADAPack 470i, and its bigger brother, if you will, the 474i. And this is, in fact, our RTU that's designed to be an IIoT edge platform for harsh environments. So it includes all those legacy RTU capabilities that our customers know and expect in SCADAPack. So for instance, 61131 logic, data logging, our object database, the ability to interface, of course, with local I/O, act as a data concentrator. So we include all those legacy capabilities that we have in our SCADAPack 470s that we've had available for a few years. And with that, we add our own Linux-based edge computer into it. So that gives us massive flexibility, or gives our customers, I should say, massive flexibility with how they can approach the problems of remote operations. So you can take advantage of your legacy infrastructure, use your logic, communicate using telemetry protocols. But extending Linux, you can also put on applications developed using Python. You can deploy them using containers. You can use C applications. You can, we include a web server, but you can include your own custom web applications. So customers will no longer need to drag around a laptop, for instance, to see what the remote sites are doing. If they have a network connection, they can log in and use a bespoke web application hosted on the RTU to show their technicians, their operators, exactly what they need to see to validate that the remote sites are doing what they're doing and apply controls if they need. Also, I'm really excited that this platform's going to give us a lot more flexibility with communications. We can run Node-RED, for instance, which gives us access to a massive protocol library. And finally, it's our platform for IT and OT conversion. So we include a lot of security enhancements with this, our initial release, and late this year, we're going to add a full suite for role-based access control compatible with Active Directory.
Oh, interesting. So you used a term I hadn't come across before. Maybe some of our audience members haven't either. Can you tell us a little bit about what Node-RED is?
Certainly. So Node-RED is an open source graphical programming tool. It was originally developed by a pair of gentlemen, if I remember correctly, working at IBM. And so and it's now been spun off, and it has its own open source society that's kind of maintained. You can join, etc. So what's the benefit of it? The key benefit is it has a huge supported protocol library that's available. So the DMP3 Foundation, for example, supports a protocol library, as does MQTT, for instance. And you can find protocol libraries not just for, let's say, big ones like that, but for more less common protocols or vendor-specific protocols. So you can use this, you connect the information, you load in the libraries, I should say, with the protocols you need. With our own SCADAPack, we include ones that allow you to access the data on that. And then creating a Node-RED application, you can gather data, for instance, in, say, in my case, from a piece of equipment from Allen Bradley using DF1, take that into the SCADAPack, go off and do something else. Or, for example, you can publish that information to an MQTT broker. Or you can publish that to an OPC UA server, for example. So it gives a lot of flexibility that typical edge devices or typical RTUs wouldn't have had in the past.
Very fascinating. Kind of gets back to that multiple path discussion earlier in this conversation. Good. Well, this concludes our discussion today. Again, my name is Mark Sen Gupta with ARC Advisory Group. I've been with James Redmond. He is the Global Offer Manager for Remote Operations with Schneider Electric, and we've been discussing trends and responses for companies in the remote operations industries. Thanks for joining.